So for everybody who on my side who doesn't know who you are, Steve, go ahead and tell everybody kind of who you are, your little bit better background. Camera. Okay. You can talk to them. You can talk to however you want.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm Steve Kuclo, a 5-time pro champion. Been in the fitness and health industry for probably over 20 years. Started as a teenager. Loved training and the body aspect to athletics and like learning about the body, and always wanted to be the biggest, fastest, strongest guy in anything I did. So that led me into really a passion of fitness, and that passion eventually grew into a hobby, which grew into a career. And anytime you're able to do something you're passionate about and able to a hobby turn into a career, it's like you get to love what you do and do what you love. So yeah, I've had a lot of success in that, a lot of failures too, but all those have been lessons into leading of what I'm doing now, spending all this time in the fitness world, understanding how the body works, helping people and educating people. And now it's utilizing all that time and knowledge into launching my own coaching group and resources and relationships that I've built, like working with guys like you, and very excited about, converting all that now into like a mastermind, doing the Upgraded Human Mastermind, which is coming up in a few weeks, May 26th in Plano.
Yep.
Have my own bodybuilding show, running that kind of in conjunction with the mastermind. So a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of great things. And, Doc, I appreciate you having me on. And then also being a part of everything I do, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's funny because I get a lot of guys, like a lot of the athletes are like, hey man, I want to do this and that. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
They're like, why not? And I'm like, eh. But the nice thing is that you were a firefighter, paramedic for how many years?
10 years. I spent 10 years in
yeah.
Dallas.
So it's a little bit different when I have a conversation with you about the body.
Yeah. Right.
Somebody's like, I really like to work out. That's awesome. How much real education do you have?
Right.
None. Yeah, that's
it's kind of like the bro science stuff, the guys that you just watch certain people online and they really don't know what they're talking about, but they spend a lot of time understanding, PEDs and the way, what they've done, what some little gym rat told them to do, a year before. So it's good to get good information out there I always say, like, coming from a place of authority, meaning you have the years, the training, the practical experience, and the years that you spent learning about it, studying about it. So that's what I like to deliver to people that I'm working with, is like, hey, this is coming from a place of authority and truth, and it's just not like, hey man, I did this a couple months ago and it worked for me. It might work for you. It might hurt you. I don't know, but it's like playing lawn darts with blindfold on.
It's always funny to me, like, because I'll talk to people and I'll be like, they'll make some random comments, and like my favorite one's still protein. Like people will be like, you got to take protein. I'm like, protein's great, but I'm like, I'm more of a branched chain guy, and they're like, oh, that's just dumb. And I'm like, do you know why you're taking protein? Mm-hmm. You're taking it to get the leucine, which is a branched chain amino acid. That's how the muscles actually really get rebuilt. The protein's great because it digests over time, so you get a slow drip of leucine over time. But the real reason you're taking it for chemistry-wise is this. And like, it's funny because like a lot of the guys at your level and stuff like that know that, and they get that. But a lot of these guys online who are still just like, well, if you just cut your calories, you'll lose all the fat you want. And I'm like, chemistry's not a thing for you. Okay.
Yeah.
But and I see this all the time. I get guys like you. I get the biggest one I get is female athletes. Mm-hmm. Man, people cannot read blood work for athletes. They sure as hell can't read it for female athletes. Like, I got this one in the other day, and this girl's all kind of freaking out. She's like 40 years old, phenomenal shape.
Sure.
And she sends me this blood work, and it's got all this, like, everything's out of the range. And she's like, my doctor's freaking out, like this and that. I'm going to die. And I'm like, you had this blood work pulled at 8, didn't you? She was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, because it says 8 on it. I'm not like clairvoyant. I just knew. And I was like, what was your workout before this? She was like, I ran 6 miles. And I was like, did you take your pre-workout? And she was like, yeah. Did you take your post? She was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. So everything on there shows she's dehydrated. Her liver levels are off the chart. Like all these type of things. And I'm like, you're totally fine. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if you factor in what you did beforehand, then this is what it should look like. If it didn't look like this, we'd have a problem.
Right.
And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. I feel so much better. And I'm like, and so we just went through it. And it's just like, I always tell athletes, I'm like, if you're an athlete, and not even a very like high end one, like you don't have to be pro. Like, do you work out 2 or 3 days a week, and do you mean it?
Yeah.
And if you're like, yeah, or like, I have a lot of women who run like 5 miles a day and they're like, I'm not an athlete. I'm like, you do more athletics than 99% of the planet. Like,
right.
You're an athlete. But, that's always the thing is, I always tell people, you can't have a twin turbocharged W12 Ferrari engine and take it to a Toyota Corolla specialist. No. Again, nothing bad. I'm not trying to dog on Toyota Corollas. Toyotas are by far the most dependable cars on the planet. Right? But it's not a Ferrari, right? You need more fuel, you need more air function, more lubrication, there's more heat, there's more distribution. Like it's just a radically different thing. Yes, they're both engines, but they're radically different. And the female athletes specifically, because there's all sorts of things you got to watch with them, especially the xeno and phytoestrogens. Because like I keep seeing these women with PCOS and endometriosis, and we'll give them the myo-inositol, which is probably the number one biggest thing these women need to be taking is myo-inositol. But then they'll be like, well, then my doctor said it didn't have anything to do with estrogen. We pull the rest, and they're like, here's my estrogens. I'm like, no, this is estradiol.
Right.
First of all, there's 4 estrogens. Yeah. They didn't pull the other 3. And second of all, it doesn't matter about the hormone. It matters about the receptor site.
Right.
So all the boxes of food and the plastic and all the tin cans, all the stuff that all the food's packaged in has xeno and phytoestrogens in it. We've got to pull those out. That's why your cycle's all screwed up. So, it's those type of things that, with athletes, we just don't see the right type of care. And that's why I like partnering with like people like you and teams like yours, because we're finally going to get the information, even if it's not like they're not my patients,
right?
At least they have access to the information now, right? And it's like, hey, here's from someone who's not necessarily trying to sell you something. Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
Like I'm a giant erythritol fan. Like I have a bunch of my patients taking erythritol basically as a supplement for their blood vessels. Yeah. And like you got people like the Food Babe out here telling everybody that erythritol causes heart attacks and strokes, which if you can read more than a paragraph, the research that she cited says that. But it is what it is. If she wants
it's like the extreme amounts of it too. It's probably like you have to eat a 55-gallon drum worth of it to have some kind of negative effect, and you're never going to use that much, probably over a lifetime.
Well, the funny thing is that it's 100% inaccurate. So what happened in this study that she's citing is that it was a beautiful study. I love the fact they did this. What they did is they were like, all right, I want people with really effed up hearts, right? So if you've had a heart cath or you're going to have a heart cath within a year of today, you're eligible. And so what they did was they took these guys who had massively screwed up hearts and they draw blood and they looked for anything they could possibly find. And they found that all of them had erythritol in their system. And so they're like, this is just a key marker for heart damage. Well, then everybody took that piece of information and was like, erythritol causes heart damage.
Right.
If you just like spend another 5 minutes, what happened was when you break what's called the pentose phosphate pathway, the PPP, your body, and you do that by using too much sugar, by the way, your body starts chemically breaking down. One of the things it starts releasing is erythritol. We don't know why. We haven't gotten asked God yet, but this is now on my list of questions. It's a long list, by the way. my questions to ask God, like, did you put the erythritol in the system specifically to heal the blood vessels? Right. Because if you look at the research on erythritol with blood vessels, it takes those hardened arteries that are more like PVC pipes, and it breaks that down and makes them more pliable, makes the muscle actually function again. So they're flexible, which is 100% better than having something hard. So you don't have the tears, you don't have the blood pressure issues. It heals the blood vessel. But it also dilates or opens up these small blood vessels, the capillaries in the brain and the hands and the feet. Well, so like people who have Raynaud's and stuff like that, who have circulation issues, when you give that to them, it helps them. So she took this piece of information that had she just read it, which it took me, 20 minutes to read, it would have just been like, oh my gosh, we should be giving everyone erythritol. But instead, her and a bunch of other people were like, oh my gosh, people who have heart issues, they also have this. So obviously we can't give this to them. Like, no, that's the cure.
They read the headline. That's it.
Right. I'm like, that's like
yeah.
You want to argue, like, here's all the research. Like when I did a 30-minute podcast myself on it, and I gave all the research. And I was like, here's where it says National Institute of Health, CDC, like I'm not a huge CDC fan after obviously the last couple of years.
Sure.
But at least their research is still solid.
Yeah.
So but that's the type of thing of, where are you going to get your information? And if you're a top end athlete, you need to be really picky with where you get your information.
Absolutely.
So, and I feel terrible for, like you talk about testosterone and people are always like, even the docs, like I talk with medical guys every day about this because they always get pissed and they call me. And they're like, this person has a weak heart. And I'm like, yeah.
I bet you
put them on testosterone.
I bet your testosterone was low, and that's why, you know.
Well, and they're like, you know that causes heart attacks and strokes. I'm like, well, let's walk back through this real quick. What do you know about testosterone? Well, people take it to get big muscles. Right. That's one of the reasons people take it. What is the heart? Oh, it's a big muscle. Don't you think we should take something to make that heart bigger and stronger? And they're like, well, heart attacks and strokes. I'm like, do you know how that happens? It increases the amount of blood volume, which is good to a very specific point, because more red blood cells, more oxygen always better.
Right.
But once it gets to a certain point, the blood becomes viscous, and that's what causes the heart attack and strokes. So as long as you're a halfway competent guy and you can pull blood, I don't know, every 3 to 6 months and see the H&H isn't going up, guess what? Patient's fine.
Yeah.
But again, the reason it was first synthesized in 1935 was to cure depression, which is what it does damn near every time we've given it to somebody who has low T and depression.
Yeah.
It's staggering. Like the mental health issue, give them testosterone.
That's probably the easiest thing, instead of like all these different chemicals that are going to mess with your brain, chemistry, which is a whole different animal.
Oh God.
Like, let's go with the most bioavailable hormone in a male's body being testosterone.
And women. Well, the funny thing is that people always talk about like, well, I want to be natural. And I'm like, do you take vitamin C?
Yeah, then you're not natural.
And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, taking testosterone is more natural than taking vitamin C. Your body makes testosterone. It doesn't make vitamin C.
Right.
People are like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah. So we'll get women it's so funny because we'll have women come in for hormone therapy who've been on pellets. And like I've had women, I want you to hold me at 350 or 400. And I'm like, why? Are you trying to grow a beard?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I was on pellets and I felt amazing when I was at 350. And then for like 3 or 4 weeks, I'd feel like hell. Well, what's happening is they put the pellets in, and you know how this works. You put the pellets in, and instead of dissolving slowly over the 3 months, they dissolved quickly over 8 weeks.
Yeah, spikes, and then it drops.
Exactly. So for like 3 to 5 weeks, they got nothing in them, and they're like, "But I felt amazing when I was on." So like you can hold women a little bit higher, but it is the number one thing because like all these women come back and they're like, "I'm more emotionally stable. I'm more logical. Like." Things that used to make me mad, I just laugh at now. Like they're just like, life's so much better.
Yeah.
And they're all of a sudden they have activations. And my favorite part about this, and I tell every woman this now, because we'll get women who come in, and when we do our consults, I'm like, just so you know, this is probably going to engorge the clitoris and stuff like that. Anyway, so I want to tell you a story. I tell everybody this story. Like, so I had this 50. I want to say she's 52. She was over 50. That's all I remember. Come in and she's like, hey. I had the first orgasm last night I've had in like 5 years. She goes, was that from the testosterone? And I was like, yeah, most likely. She was like, okay, you didn't even tell me that. You need to lead with that next time. And I was like, sorry.
Sold.
Yeah. Well, because like testosterone is the number one way to get rid of erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
Well, the tissue embryonically is very similar. So when you give a woman testosterone, it increases the blood flow and nerve function to her clitoris, allowing for sometimes the first orgasms in like this lady's years. But every woman has stronger, faster, easier orgasms. And so every woman we've ever had on testosterone comes back in and is just like, my life is awesome.
Yeah.
And then their husbands come in and go, dude, you saved my marriage. Thank you so much. Like I'm every husband's best friend.
Absolutely.
So, but again, it's just one of these things that, if we can get information in, we can help these people figure this stuff out, that's more beneficial. And the nice thing is that, the other reason that I love giving people tests who have depression is the only thing we have research on that is far superior to giving testosterone for anxiety and depression is exercise.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of people, especially with COVID, who don't have the energy to exercise. They pass the point of diminishing returns. And so if you don't give them testosterone, they can't have the energy or the wherewithal to regenerate and heal after the workout, so they shouldn't be working out.
Right.
Well, if you give them the testosterone so their body can function properly, then they go work out, boom. You just give them the two biggest powerhouses for anti-anxiety, anti-depression, which is exercise and testosterone.
Correct.
So, and people just watching people change is ridiculous. It's so much fun. But, and that's the thing I love about athletes is that, they're already doing all the things they need to do. You just be like, you're 5% off here, and you're 5% off here, and you're 10% off here.
And then the only way you can truly do that is blood work. You can't, there's a lot of people that do the guessing game, and that's been well, I don't feel good. Well, I'm just going to start taking something. Well, if you don't get the blood work, you're not going to know exactly what's going on to take the right amount. And typically, you could probably look at somebody that comes in, tells you some symptoms. You're going to know pretty close to what it is. Like, if they feel like they're holding that little excess fluid and body fat, but I'm taking testosterone. Well, your estrogen is probably way off.
Yep.
And so there's that ratio that it likes to be. And if one's up, the other one's going to rise with it, unless we try to control it and keep it down. So that's why I always encourage people they come to me, ask for advice, get some blood work done. And I mean, I've done enough blood work myself and seen I understand it enough that probably better than most doctors do, that you could usually it's a few basic things that need to be done to correct that. But getting blood work is a key, definitely, to making sure that you do the right steps to get you in the right place.
Well, and it's funny because I got patients who have to donate blood once or twice a year.
Yeah.
I've had to donate blood in 10 years, twice.
Do you believe in that? Do you believe in donating blood?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
especially for somebody, say that is more of a anabolic user that has a lot more, like a higher level of hematocrit. Do you feel it is valuable to do on a regular, or is it?
No. So the way that
I've heard two theories on it. Like, I'll just give them to you, and then I'll have you talk. Like one being like, you're decreasing the amount of volume or fluid in the tank, and it's going to help decrease the pressure. You're going to feel better. And I've done it personally. And then I had another theory on it saying, well, if you're taking it out, your body's going to try to replenish that quicker, so it's producing more by taking it out. So
the way that I always do mine is I like everybody to check their blood every quarter. Right? Every 3 months, check your blood. If your H&H is high, go donate blood. And then we're going to check it in another 3 months. And what I typically see is that the guys who run hot and then blood dump or whatever we want to call it, they donate. We don't see them back up very quickly.
Okay.
We've got some guys who their body just makes a lot of red blood cells.
Sure.
You give them more tests, they're going to make more red blood cells. And so it's like, all right, you have to do it every so often. But like a lot of the guys, not so much. Now there are some factors that play into that, right? Like if you're super dehydrated, that can be one of the things. It's not always, but it can be. But at the end of the day, I'm like, look, it'd be much easier for you to if you're 2 points over, just go donate blood. And then we'll check again a little bit later. It's not that big of a deal. The biggest thing is that has been driving me batshit crazy is the amount of people who go to their doctor and say, doctor, will you pull my blood and look at my testosterone and this and that? And they say, no. Not the insurance won't cover it. Not, well, if you really want, it's an extra $50 or $100 or $200. They just flat say no. And it happens so often that I was just like, I just lost it. And so I've set it up. We're going to build this out, but we're set up on the Pillars and the Chalmers Wellness website where you can go buy your own blood labs. If you want to know, go buy your blood lab. And then, go to LabCorp the next day.
Yeah, they got a lot. They have those places now. You can just walk right in and say, "This is what I want."
So you buy it. So you buy it online because then you get all of our discounts. You buy it online, and then you just go there the next day or 2 days later, anywhere in the U.S. Like we have a lot of people who live in Frisco or Texas, but they fly to Atlanta or New York, where they just go in and get their blood drawn there, and then 2 days later, it's in their system.
Sure.
And I set it up intentionally so that we don't know. So I'm not going to come back through and be like, hey, I saw your D3's low. Here's an ad for D3 or here's an ad for testosterone. That's not what we do. So like I got to deal with the other side of that, right? I was like, I didn't look at it. So if you want me or your doctor to look at it, take it to them, call us or call them and go to them. But this is for a lot of those people who are just like, I'm just wondering where I am here, where I am there. And so they can go back and through that and do that because like you said, blood work is so critical. A lot of these guys, like I've taught a bunch of people how to do this. It's not rocket science. Like putting everything together is a little bit more tricky, but just, am I being safe? Okay. Pull your DHT levels, pull your tests, just look at what the levels are. I give you a rate out, how you figure it out, but blood work is hyper critical. So the fun thing about blood work though is, so I always tell people when we're going to do medical stuff, we want medical testing. So blood work for injections is fantastic. Real quick on that one, because you and I talk about this a lot, but I don't say this very much out loud. Injectable testosterone is wildly safer than oral testosterone. The pills will screw you up fast
because a lot of them are methylated, and they just have to
they just shred the liver.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything you might know. I don't know of too many things that are more damaging to the liver than Winstrol tabs.
There's a few compounds out there there's a few like older stuff that it's not really around. It's more in the powerlifting industry. You see. One used to be called check drops, and the old school guys were like, oh yeah, you should take those. Those were like, there's like tests. If you look at the old anabolics book, if you ever read that, you know, I still probably have one from like 2000. It's 23 years old, and it's like the holy grail of anabolics. And like testosterone's rated at like 100. And then there's the other one that's like significantly higher, which is just extremely anabolic, is halotestin. That's it's you take it pre-contest, it's super high DHT derivative. Like the way it works in the body, it hardens everything. Your strength goes through the roof, but it has really no muscle like building capabilities. It's like just a straight hardener guys use, and strength increases. But there's one that was like 100 times more toxic than that, which was check drops, and like you literally couldn't take it more than 2 or 3 days, or you'd be like pissing out your liver. like if you went and got blood work done, they'd be like, okay, you have absolute like liver failure. It's not even like you probably, are you drinking a lot, or
I don't know how you're standing here.
So yeah, there's some pretty wild stuff out there that you can only take like for a few weeks at a time. And a lot of it's the orals because they have to pass through the liver in order to be effective in your body, but. People were thinking for a long time a lot of the pro hormones were safe, but those were just methylated versions of test, which were extremely toxic to the liver, and more so than like your traditional like anabolics like Anavar or Winstrol, stuff like that.
And that's one of those funny things, because I'll have people who be like, well, I don't want to do any injections. I'm not at that level. I'm not want to play with that dangerous game. But I bought this stuff online, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, man.
Right. Like
they're all pro hormones and stuff. And I'm like, do you know the safety protocols on there? Just because you bought them online and they're legal to buy online does not mean they're okay.
Right.
It's kind of like, I love peptides. I'm a giant ipamorelin, samorelin, tesamorelin fan. And I like LR3. And a lot of these guys are taking some of this stuff because they don't understand what it is. And they're like, well, I was able to order it online, so it's safe. Like, why is my jaw shaped weird now? And why do I look pregnant? It's like, because you fucking took too much growth.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they're mixing up stuff. Like there's a lot of, because it's that considered kind of a gray area where the FDA and they don't really know how to label it. So it's still available online, but at the same time, like, be careful with the source that you get stuff from.
Yes.
Because a lot of it is fake, or it's labeled one thing and it's another. Like
or it's not the dosage that they say it is.
Correct. Like you see that with growth hormone a lot. Like there's a lot of guys like, I bought a kit for $100. I was like, real growth hormone's way higher than that. And it's probably not growth hormone.
If you're like, I got good growth for $1,000, I'm like, you got a month's worth of good growth for $1,000? You must know a guy.
Yeah, right.
Because I mean, I can buy that, but like I've seen a lot of good growth cycles at, $3-4 grand. This is a couple of years ago. It's come down a little bit, but I've seen those things just stupid high.
No, it is. Like the real kits from like CVS and Walgreens without insurance, it's like 4 of them are like 14 grand. Like I looked at a GoodRx once. Yeah. Almost fell out of my chair. Like, holy crap. But I mean, that's what in the bodybuilding industry, a lot of the guys that that go overseas and train during like their prep for the Olympias and stuff, they have a lot more access to the high level stuff. Yeah. And just because of the price of a lot of the medications that are here in the U.S. are just, it's so unaffordable, so unattainable for most people.
Well, the other problem is that, they're pushing back so hard on all of this. Mm-hmm. Like if you're going to push back on some of the stuff that's like Dynabol or some of this, you're like, all right, I mean, I'll let you have that one. But when they're so fucking just anal about tests, and I'm like, God, test is super important. Like you guys need to back off test.
It's funny because the lawmakers that are making these laws are trying to attack this. I guarantee they're probably on test themselves, but there's something with.
Well, they should be.
I mean, when you think about like tests, the benefits of tests far outweigh any negative things that could come of it. Yes.
Well, so the problem we run into is that the only thing that it's really negative to would be pharmaceutical companies.
And that's getting to my point.
Right. Because if you just run through off the top of my head, the things that testosterone fixes, erectile dysfunction, bone density, so all your osteopenia, osteoporosis is gone.
Right.
I can't fix ulcerative colitis without it because it heals the gut. So heart, blood vessels. So here's a fun thing about the DVTs, right? So a DVT is a deep vein thrombosis. It's a clot that's in your low leg. This is why old people are supposed to get up and walk around on planes. But anyway, what happens is that the inside of the blood vessel is a muscle, tunica media. Mm-hmm. If that muscle is healthy, it stays strong and it stays open. And when you squish it, it pops back to a pipe. Well, when it gets weak, when that tone starts to deteriorate and the muscle starts to deteriorate, it gets soft and flabby, and so the blood vessel collapses, blood slows down and coagulates. If you give those person testosterone and the neurologic tone returns to that muscle, it helps prevent DVTs. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things: anxiety, depression, metabolism, healing, fat loss, like all those things are just from testosterone. And how many drugs did I just mention? Like all of the antidepressant drugs are out there, all of the erectile dysfunction drugs that are out there, all of the heart stuff that's out there, all that crap. So
you could probably correct most of it. You can take from taking 10 medications to like 1 or 2.
I have taken a lot of people, and with diet and test, got them off 75% of their drugs.
Yeah.
I had a diabetic come in the other day, and she's on metformin, which metformin by and of itself, I actually kind of like metformin. It's a really cool drug to play with blood sugars. She's on insulin. She's on all sorts of stuff. And she was like, I don't want to be on these drugs anymore, so I'm just going to quit. And I was like, well, okay, hold on. I was like, you can't just do that. You'll die. And she was like, well, then how can I do it? And I was like, have you gone keto? And she was like, no. So we gave her a test and she went keto. And then I swear, this happens all the time when I work with diabetics. In 3.5 weeks, she went from, her blood sugar was 355 fasting.
Wow.
No insulin because her doctor, her diabetes doctor didn't know to pull insulin, which is another pet peeve of mine. And then within 3 weeks, I dropped her down to 135 fasting glucose.
Wow.
And her insulin was, I can't remember what it was. It was under 10. And so she goes, well, my doctor still has a problem because it's still over 100. And I was like, but did they look at your insulin? And she was like, they didn't mention anything about that. And I was like, well, you got this done in the morning, right? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, you were fasting? She was like, yeah. And I said, on ketosis. She said, absolutely. And I was like, does your doctor know about the dawn effect? Where your body just makes glucose through gluconeogenesis for your liver and for your blood at the beginning of the day. Right. And so it will spike it up, but it keeps your insulin level low. And she goes, no. And I was like, well, how do you know? And she was like, there's no way he knows that.
Yeah.
And she went back and asked, and he was like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. There's no such thing. Yeah. And she was like, that was when she quit working with that guy. But, it's that type of thing, that if we, so now she's off. She was on some mild antidepressants. She was on some anti-anxiety things. She was on, of the metformin, the insulin. She was on 1 or 2 other things. And within like 6-8 weeks, she got off all of those things. Wow. She's just on injectable tests, and she works out now, and she's on keto. She's lost a bunch of weight. She feels fantastic. She's like, I'm finally sleeping more again. And it's irritating that people just don't, I don't know. They were told by, our government, 1980 that testosterone was the worst thing ever. And so they've all just decided that's it.
It's got such a terrible rap. And I'm glad that there's more education coming out of it now. People coming out like yourself, speaking about it, educating the masses that make people realize, hey, maybe you need to, again, if somebody says something with a definitive, like maybe you need to question it. Like, I never, anybody that says like, well, you can't do this or this is bad. Well, why is it bad? Like, give me some information. Show me the research. Show me some proof with it. And with a lot of the supplementation, the stuff, I always like bodybuilding and bodybuilders are probably your best guinea pig for stuff that's never been studied by science.
Right.
But they know the shit that works, and they know the stuff like that they've tried or that's never been studied by true science. But you can call it bro science or bodybuilding science. Yeah. However, the amount of information, I mean, just on myself on a practical use, I've taken knowledge from other people that have done stuff or have coached tons of people. I mean, that's how I've been able to do it so long at the levels I've done it, and always been conservative with it. People always think most bodybuilders do insane amount of cycles, and that's true, but you'd be surprised at guys in the gym that are walking around in your average lifetime that probably do. They've never competed, never do anything like on a high level, but are taking insane amount of stuff. Oh, yeah. I'm like, who told you to do this? Well, to some amateur bodybuilder guy that's never really done anything, maybe one show, or that this guy that's popular online, there's no idea what he's talking about, gave me this stack or this cycle to do. And I'm like, this is insane. Like you don't need to use any of this, nor it's probably 10 times the amount you should be ever taking. So yeah, there's a lot of bad information out there. I think learning from people that like yourself, or that somebody that can come from a place of authority that understands and knows what the body does and why the physiological processes of, if you take something, there's the positive and negative effect with everything. So yeah, if you are going to take testosterone, then you got to start watching a few other things, but you keep those ratios in line. Yeah. Your life's good. You're living. There's guys that are in their late 30s and 40s now that are friends of mine. I'm like, you guys take testosterone or are familiar with hormone replacement therapy? And they're like, no. I'm like, you should go get some blood work done. Start looking into it. So you're going to feel like you're 25 again, not 45.
Yeah. Well, and so when we talk about anti-aging, I'm always like, I can't turn the clock back, but I can slow it down. Mm-hmm. Don't come to me when you're 60 and ask for anti-aging. Come to me when you're 35 and ask for anti-aging, especially the women. Like, that's the thing. Like people are like, well, once I have this kid, I'm like, oh God, no. No. The worst thing to do is to have a baby without training for it. Because like I probably see 4 or 5 women a month who come in who are under 30, who've had a kid or two, and they'll tell me that they pee on themselves when they laugh. And they're like, well, just after you kids. I'm like, your pelvic floor is weak. Yeah. This is super easy to fix. They should have fixed this before you had this problem, but they don't, And so like you say, hey, look, if you want to freeze the clock, start as soon as you can. And that's most the hormones are a big player in that. Sure. Keeping the estrogens, even in women, estrogens low and the test, moderate and high. That's a big thing with the nutrition and the supplementation and stuff like that is also a really, really big piece, but it's always funny to me. Like you say, like I'll get guys come in and they're like, there's a company who is selling people anything that they'll allow them to buy. Yeah. I know. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And they come in with these like $2,000 a month things from them. Like, what are your goals? Like, do you want to be on stage next year? Right. They're like, no, I just want to be healthy. And I'm like, you're taking 5 times more than you need. Right. And I'm like, I haven't written this for any of my guys who compete. Yeah. Like, this is a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, well, I didn't know. And so it's always funny because people are like, this idea that all you have to do to get big muscles and look great and the whole thing is just take some steroids and that's right. What happens. Like, those guys look like that because they took steroids. Right. And it's the more is better mentality, which is not the case. Right. Always, so yeah, because it's always funny because I always tell people the reason that bodybuilders really take the testosterone is because of what's called the point of diminishing returns, and mumbling my words. What ends up happening is if you break yourself down in the gym 3 units mm-hmm. and you can rebuild 5, you will get bigger, stronger, and healthier. However, if you break yourself down 3 units, but you can only rebuild 2, you've now done more harm to yourself by going to the gym than if you had not gone at all. Right. This is what we see with a lot of the Lymes, with a lot of the long COVID, with a lot of the fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. We're seeing that with a lot now. And it's because you didn't have all the chemistry to rebuild what you did. Right. Because the other misnomer, I said, well, I go to the gym to build muscle. No, you go to the gym to break muscle down. Mm-hmm. You go to bed at night. That's what builds muscle. Exactly. Right. So, but that's the thing. Because I'm like, what are your goals? Mm-hmm. And like you said, I don't know, of the guys who come in who are on test, very rarely do I see them at the right levels. They're either too low because their doctor was like, well, 400's in the range. And I'm like, you need to be at 1,000 on trough day. Yeah. And they're like, what's trough day? I'm like, did your doctor tell you anything? Yeah, no. So, but, we'll get guys in here who are at like 2,500 and on like 6 peptides. And I'm like, what are you doing? Right. So, but no, it is kind of and I don't think it's that hard. Like I teach guys how to do this all the time. It takes me about an hour and a half to teach MDs, like everything they need to know about hormone function. Yeah. The other thing that pisses me off is I'm ranting. But if your doctor tells you anything about your thyroid and all he pulled was the TSH, or she, never talk to that person again. How about your thyroid's low? Well, all they have is TSH in front of them, and you're like, well, how is it low? That's my thing. That's just a stimulating hormone. That's not my levels. Yeah, you're looking at a brain hormone, right? Trying to tell me what my thyroid is. And I tell people, they still don't get it. And I'm like, all right, do you have teenagers? Have you ever met a teenager? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, now, if you were to tell that teenager, hey, go clean your room, do you 100% trust that they clean the room exactly like you wanted it done? And they're like, God, no. And I'm like, you had to go check for yourself, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's why you pull T3, T4. Mm-hmm. The TSH just tells your thyroid, hey, make some stuff. Yeah. Whether or not it's making the right amount, we have to go look for that. And so that's always, and I had a lady who had her thyroid removed. She's working with this doc for like a year and a half. And she brings me like her last 3 blood work. And I'm looking at it, and her thyroxine, her T4 is fine, or T3 is always just within the range, but way too low. And I'm like, what meds are you on? And she's like, thyroxine. And I was like, that's it? She's like, I'm like, so you're not doing anything for T3? She's like, no. And I'm like, and your testosterone is 6? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, so she doubled your thyroxine? She's not looking at any of your other hormones? She's like, I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
It's just the amount of care that people are getting is atrocious. So it's just, it's a battle to deal with that. But